hear of Mr. Edward Cabbell, longtime resident of West Virginia? Could you, lifelong, could you give us a background?
We're part of it.
Could you give me some predecessors to the kind of work that you're doing? People that, when you first started out, that you might have read from, get an understanding of African, Negro contributions to.
You know, probably he had. Around about 1916, I believe it was, in General Negro History. And he had written an article, Black People in Africa. He was wow, that time in West Virginia, how a lot of his career was.
He was born here, though, wasn't he? Carter G. Woodson.
No, he was not born here. No, he was not born in West Virginia. But he spent some early years in West Virginia, around in the area of Huntington, and he worked around the coal mines and stuff in that part of the state. And he was the principal of Douglas High School in the Cabbell County, which was the place was Huntington, and he was associated at one time as administrator. He was not the president, though, of West Virginia State College, now West Virginia State University.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you a question. I guess, and in part, it's a follow-up from some of the same types of questions that I asked the former Center for Black Culture Director, Catherine Bancole. And the questions that I asked her referred to the status of black people in West Virginia, and the status in terms of our general status. I mean, is West Virginia the kind of place where black people can come and expect a parity in terms of the quality of life they received here in this area?
Well, it has to be a black person that was in a state of disillusionment, because that's what they would happen to them when they got here. West Virginia is a very strange state. In fact, among historians of West Virginia is often called the bastard child of a political rape, since every inch of West Virginia came out of Virginia. And there are those scholars and others who state that West Virginia is more northern. I beg to differ. West Virginia is like the rest of the mountain south, and while it has some variations in the way that people think and the way they approach black people, it's still the South.
Right.
And because of the coal mines, well, let's not even go that far. There are very few slaves in Western Virginia, which is what West Virginia actually is. They picked the right name, West Virginia, because it is the western part of Virginia. And although it may be a separate state now since June the 20th, 1863, the same year as the Emancipation Proclamation, it became a state that in some ways reflected northern values in some places that people have confused that it is still different from the South. It's not that different. I come from a family that has had, maybe 200 years of association with West Virginia. And the people here, how would you say it? Probably put it in succinct words. You say, they talk one thing and they do another.
Now, you're talking about the establishment, or you're talking about just regular people out on that you would come in contact with out on the street or in public?
I'm talking about all of them. Because what you're really getting at, how do the white folks treat the black folks in West Virginia?
Well, you know what? Since you said it outright, I'd like to be able to get an understanding on how do whites perceive blacks in West Virginia.
Well, sometimes I wonder whether they perceive them at all. Because in my dealings with them, like anybody else, there are some that you could say that are okay. And there are others whose philosophy tends to be give them hell. I'm
Right.
talking about the white attitude toward the blacks. There are many deceptions in black-white relationships in West Virginia. Sometimes in a community, those blacks that have been there a long time probably feel halfway accepted. But a person who was coming in and was used to a different type of relationship with white people, as far as jobs and housing, health care, and those type of things that make life amenable to black people, they find it lacking in several degrees here.
Right, right.
Whereas a person who didn't live here come from somewhere else, where they know what they're supposed to be getting and have a right to, they feel it's lacking.
Right.
Because in West Virginia, sometimes I think the real civil rights movement never got here.
Right, right. You had little glimpses of it,
Yes.
but not really out in the street.
No, not much. There was some in around college towns, like Bluefield State College in the southern part of the state. There was a civil rights movement. I remember demonstrations.
Right, right. And I heard
As a
about
young
that.
kid, yeah, I remember going to Bluefield and Kresge's and Woolworths and at the Colonial Theater and other places like that. I remember outright discrimination. And at the YMCA and at the, a lot of those buildings like that.
You couldn't go into them places. You had to go.
Yeah, you could go in them, but you wouldn't receive equal treatment in them. For instance, I remember when I was a kid, and because I was born in McDowell County, and you get on a bus and you go to Bluefield to shop, because that was the boom town that was closest to us. Because in McDowell County, that Welch was the county seat, and they had something, but Bluefield was it at that time. And you go up there, and you couldn't even go to a restroom, except at the bus station in Bluefield, and that's way down on the lower end.
And you had the signs up, the colored and white signs. You remember that as a child coming up in that area of the state?
Oh yeah, definitely. I know
That's a Jim Crow.
Reminded me of that. Yeah, I remember those signs. I remember when I was a small boy. One time I went up in the theater in the white bathroom for men. So they'd have colored men and colored women. They didn't have white though. I remember they had ladies and gentlemen signs. The sign said lady was for white women, and the sign said gentlemen was for white men. And the colored women, colored men. So I remember one day in the theater, I decided I'd go up there in the white men's bathroom because I wanted to see. I said, what's so different that they got a different bathroom from us? I just figured a bathroom was a bathroom. So I went up in the theater, and of course they came up there and told me to get out. But I went up there and I said, I don't understand this. That was crazy. I thought, to me, it was just useless because just have one for men, one for women. There wasn't more people that could go in there. That two bathrooms would handle everybody.
So West Virginia definitely adhered to the separate but equal, separate and unequal, but separate but equal. That was
well, yeah, they used to call it separate but equal, but it was unequal. Yes.
Right, right.
But now. When I remember going in that bathroom, they were just alike, really.
Right, right.
And I said, well, how come the white man got to go up there by himself and stuff? You know, I said, this is ridiculous. But I knew something was wrong because it didn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, looking at the history of West Virginia, I was able to find out that West Virginia had one of the most developed segregated systems in terms of black schools and so forth throughout the state.
Oh yeah, it was like two separate groups. I mean, everything. Like at blacks, we had some ways, some of that stuff. It was better, really,
Than what it is now.
than it is now for blacks.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was growing up, like you'd have they even had in some areas where it's large enough, they had a black hospital, they had a black drugstore, you know, and black churches. They still have black churches, though, but in some ways it was better. In an area where there are very few blacks, sometimes separate and equal worked out to our advantage.
Right, right. That was one of the things I wanted to get you to, because in the interview with Ban Coley, that was one of the things we talked about, was the fact that they conducted the 50th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. And they did an analysis on the state, checked out all its areas of civil rights, housing, employment, education, found out that black people were suffering gross disparities in every area possible in the state of West Virginia, where with 3% of the population. At this time, Mount Olive is close to 80-85% black. Can't get a job, but you're being housed in the prison systems. And the issue for us at that time, in the interview, the issue was whether or not, what did we gain from Brown versus Bordenkercher, and what did we lose? Did we lose more than we gained? Because our kids come up now, they don't have the black teacher.
In some ways, I think we've gone back instead of progressing. Well, now my grandkids stay with me, and I know it's like under the old system, if you were a good black student, now that was a certain amount of intra-racial discrimination too.
Right.
That we probably won't get into, whether you were light or whether you were dark complected and all like that. But if you were a black student in the black schools that I went to, and you showed academic promise, the teachers would take you aside and give you extra lessons, give you extra things to learn. I remember when I was in the junior high school, at Keystone Ekman Junior High School in McDowell County, I had an English and music teacher named Mrs. Wingfield, and we would write things in class. Anyhow, she recognized a certain amount of literary and academic talent in me. And so by the time I was in the 8th grade, I was reading. She gave me a book of complete works of Shakespeare. I was reading that.
She helped cultivate and helped encourage that.
Because she recognized that type of talent within me. And she would give me these books. And she gave me a book by Shakespeare. And of course I read all of that. And I would come in at recess, instead of going out playing, I'd go in there and we'd discuss it. I remember one of the first plays by Shakespeare I read was Titus Andronicus. I remember telling her, she said, "How did you like that book?" And I remember telling her, I said, "Those white people, that book crazy." They're eating each other, they grind up the bones and eating them all. I enjoyed reading it because, to tell the truth, I thought white people were crazy anyway, because I didn't like the way they operated in society. And so I read it because I said, "Oh, well, this just proves it, that they really are crazy." Crazy. And so I read other books, you know, but at the same time that I was doing that, when I took music from her, she would teach us the old spirituals, and we learned about the Fifth Jubilee things, you know, and singing like that. And so I was getting a black side too. And then I would not only read Shakespeare, but I had a desire to read everything black I could, especially biographies. I would read those. At first, it would be the ones we have all the time, like Booker T. Washington and people like that. The what I call the major black historical figures. Oh, I'd read everything I could get my hands on. If it was black, I'd read it.
Now, would you, Booker T. Washington, you mentioned him. He spent time here in West Virginia.
A lot of time, yes.
And believe it or not, I had the opportunity to review some of the work by Larry Rowe, which he was involved with the Senate Select Committee in doing an evaluation on this state back in 2005 for the 50th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. He notated a bunch of disparities in all areas, like I was talking about earlier, but he said Booker T. Washington was a beacon of black power within the state. And given the history, more often than not, we perceive Booker T. Washington as being an accommodationist. And I was wondering, where could this white guy who grew up in Malden, West Virginia, get off saying that Booker T. Washington was a beacon of black power, although we hold him in high esteem for his institutional development work that he did in developing West Virginia State and Tuskegee, as well as the other historic black colleges. They're not that today. And I ask you, how did we get into the situation that we are in now, where you have a historically black college, West Virginia State, that is like 80% white, even though it's a historical black college? How did we get there?
Well, West Virginia State, President Wallace, who later became the president of West Virginia State College, he was an administrative assistant under another president that had that. And he wanted to make West Virginia State a living laboratory of racial relations.
Oh.
And to me, that was the beginning of handing West Virginia State College on a silver platter to the white folks.
Thank you for that comment, because that's exactly that's good talk right there. So in opening the door for integrations, good relationships between blacks and whites.
Well, they claim that his decision at that time opened the door for blacks to really come to West Virginia U. Because West Virginia State was the black college and it remained a college. Until recently, they made it West Virginia University after a lot of the whites went down it. But it opened the door for black people to come into West Virginia University. Because West Virginia at that time had 2 land-grant colleges. One for blacks, West Virginia State, one for whites, West Virginia University. And it opened the door for blacks to come to West Virginia U, particularly those seeking graduate studies. Because now, at one time, a black teacher, when he or she desired a master's degree, would go out of state.
Right.
They go to, Columbia and all kinds of schools like that.
The state would have to pay for it because they
would
that.
Pay, yes. They would pay their tuition stuff. This opened the door for blacks to become educated at WVU.
Okay.
And so, again, depending on how you evaluate education, would you rather come to West Virginia University or to go to Columbia, some other school up north that has a long history of extremely fine academics that would admit blacks at the time? It's a strange thing,
Right.
Yeah, West Virginia and its choices. Also, I believe in some counties, because of the small number of blacks in West Virginia was actually paying more money per pupil for the education of blacks than it was for whites. And I've heard that.
Right. That's a good point right there.
There were some excellent black schools in West Virginia.
Right. I've read on and I've seen that they said the schools in West Virginia.
You can tell by the number of people from West Virginia who leave the state and become outstanding black leaders. Leon Sullivan, some of them.
Right. And he had went through an all black educational experience.
Oh, yeah, in Charleston. Yeah, that was Charleston.
Right. What I wanted to ask you, though, is given the fact that we have an African-American president I'd like to be able to get some of your thoughts on that. And West Virginia's position, because West Virginia did not
support him.
They did not support
No.
him. So I'd like to get your comments on that, given your background.
Oh, I think it is a wonderful experience to be able to go through personally with a black man as president of the United States of America. Because when I was born in the 40s, I never conceived in any way that in my lifetime a black man would be elected president. With the advent of Obama become president of the United States, I think it was a significant achievement, but it was not the solution to racism.
Mm-hmm.
I think Obama, for the short time that he's been in now, is doing an excellent job.
Right.
But while some of white America voted for Obama, I don't believe that they were ready for the independence and intelligence that he's exhibited. I think white radicals assume that, as a lot of times they do other liberals, I won't even call them radicals, but I find very few radicals of any color in the United States. True radicals.
Mm-hmm.
I think in some cases white liberals figure that they are going to be able to think for black people. And I noticed that as Obama, sometimes because of his rationale in dealing with the problems of America, given the new type of intelligence he's given from the various groups and the types of people around him, he changes some of the things that he originally thought, but he had no way of knowing the dire situation he was getting into. Because as president, you're given lots of information that you're not privy to as a citizen.
Mm-hmm.
And when he makes some of his decisions, some of the liberals, so-called, and I quote liberals, get angry because they don't know what he knows now. And I think he's doing a good job of trying to straighten all of the mess that he inherited out. Because Obama, as president of the United States, reminds me exactly of black mayors in the cities that began to occur in the late 60s and early 70s.
That's right. I agree with you 100% on that.
A black man is always given, I don't want to make an analogy, but it's like the black janitor sweeping out the white folks' mess.
Right, and that's what they do. They call us on
When they can't figure out how to do it themselves.
That's right. That's right.
And if the black man is not wise, he will end up being a scapegoat.
That's right. That's right.
You know, so many things happened with the election of Obama. For instance, Hillary Clinton, who I admire to a great extent, was running against Obama. Some of the things that she said in order to try to win were ridiculous, I thought.
Her and Bill.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Don't forget Bill Clinton is from Arkansas. And I ain't gonna put from Arkansas, but it is not known as a hotbed of liberality.
Right.
Don't forget the Arkansas 9, wasn't it?
You're talking about Little Rock.
Yeah, Little Rock in Arkansas. Little Rock, don't forget them, how they were treated. Now, but I figured that although Hillary Clinton treated him awful, he still elected her as Secretary of State.
Right, right. And that now, if you think about him doing that, that's a strategy that tells me that they all had the same people already working in their camps. Meaning that they're all part of the Democratic Party. Their parties was falling off. The Democrats and the Republicans were falling off, and the election of Obama allows Americanism an opportunity to live on and be presented to a younger generation, because they was being held as the great Satan all over the planet.
Oh yeah, and a lot of that winning of Obama was help from young white people.
Right, Right. Who don't necessarily have the same type of disposition that their parents and grandparents have.
Never have the same position as the parents.
Right.
Because always part of the process of growing up is to rebel against what your parents teach and believe.
So in their rebellion, they adopt into black youth culture.
Right, and then sometimes I wonder, although that rebellion of young white students had a great deal to do with Obama winning, when their children come along, will there be a backlash?
Right.
See, I think often we lose as much as we gain. And so I don't know if I'll live that long, but it would be interesting to see how the children of the generation that elected Obama will react to black-white relationships. I hope that it's better, but often I believe it will be, you get that backlash. Because America had gone into extreme arena of conservatism with the election of Bush.
Right.
Who to me was, for my generation, I felt he was ridiculous.
Right.
But yet he served 2 terms.
And he put black people on the highest level that they. Now we knew when he did that what he was doing, but that's colonialism right there.
Well, they can call it what they want. When you do it, you do it. Mm-hmm. Abraham Lincoln, they said, didn't really want to free the slaves, but he did. Mm-hmm. He signed the paper. So
in form, but not in substance.
Well, I know we just talking about the Emancipation Proclamation, but it did say in any state wherein the people were in a rebellion against the government of the United States, from that day forward that he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, they were free. And as the Union Army advanced south, lots of black people were freed, technically.
Right. Now, here in the state of West Virginia, blacks in the state of West Virginia were not freed until the state constitution.
Oh, Maryland, a lot of states. It didn't affect slavery. If you were in a state that was pro-union,
right.
Well,
slavery still existed here. Right. And it took people like Harriet Tubman to bring.
There was other places too. Those blacks who were among the Indian tribes, some of the Indian tribes had slaves too.
Right.
And the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free them. None of the 13, 14, and 15 Amendment, because they were considered as a separate group.
I mean, so the slaves that were held by the Indian tribes, they weren't even regarded. They had no status whatsoever.
No, but now one thing about it, when you read and understand through oral history about their position, they were not in the same position as the blacks that were held by whites. They were not. And another thing, that upsets me about that thing about slavery, we often hear, black people on slaves, black people on slaves. Sure, there are some examples where some blacks, particularly mulattoes in states like Louisiana and like that, owned slaves. But many of the so-called slaves owned by blacks were under condition that if a black person was freed, he or she would have to get out of the state within 6 months or file for a petition, to remain in that state. And often the blacks that were listed as having slaves had purchased members of their own family. They had been freed before that law, and they could purchase people in their own family. Right. So technically they were slaves, but in reality they weren't.
See, that makes me go back to the Dred Scott decision again, where they said in that decision, whether you was a slave or a freeman, that if you was black or part of Negro descent, that you were subject to white people's authority.
Oh yeah.
Period. So it really didn't make no difference. That was just
what,
haggling over.
I understand what your question is for them, but tell me now, you still, and me too, subject to white man's authority.
As long as we see here, that's the issue about Dred Scott. That's the issue about groups like the Nation of Islam, right? Give an example. It would be saying that, like what they say, as long as we live with white people, we are living up under their authority, and the only way to get out from up under that is to create. They're talking about
a black nation.
A black nation where we self-government. Now this is what the government, the United States government, has done in part with the so-called Native Americans. They let them think that they were that they were moving them toward a direction of self-government, self-determination. But prior to that, they had a program to extinguish them and kill them off. Yeah,
of course, they tried to kill them off.
They tried to kill them off. Yeah, so after
they
that,
give them blankets with smallpox and all kind of stuff.
And this is the same thing that they had done with us. On one end, making us think that, okay, we're doing this in your best interest. You are distinct people. Then on the other end, come on and integrate. But as you integrate amongst them, they're working on extinguishing you,
destroying your culture and society,
destroying you through integration.
Because it would be to their advantage.
Be to their advantage. Even with the look at John Smith and the Pocahontas story. They married into that family. They married the king, the chief's daughter, to be able to get in close. Through integration, through intermarriage. It was destruction of them people.
Destroy their structureless society.
That's right. So
they didn't marry our women, but why do you think we got all those mulattoes?
You know, that came largely during the slavery period, where the so-called slave master had access to the black
slave woman,
because that was his property. You know,
and it was more than his property. There are instances recorded that in some cases, although it seems hard to believe, I believe in some cases some of them were actually in love with each other.
Yeah, well, you know what? Since you said that, right, I read on that, and it said that you really, being involved with the slave master gave the Negro woman a better option at life. And this is the same thing that our women go through today, right? If they ain't...
It's something that I often wonder, like, with the rise of the number of black men and getting involved with white women. Why? Because throughout history, the black woman has been the true woman of the world. Like, the black woman is Mother Earth.
Right. And
I never could understand why younger black boys today have shown this great attraction for white women.
So they don't know. See, they don't know, and they hadn't been properly trained by the preceding generation. I got a little bit of that. I'm 45. Now, this younger generation, everything they seen come from the hip hop culture and all that kind of stuff, where we had a lot of what's that misogynism in us, right? Hatred for the woman, because a young boy didn't really like receiving authority, being told to do things from his mother, right?
So, but many cases they had to, because of the way our society is.
Right.
The black mother was the only figure he had now, because the daddy was gone.
Daddy was
coming in and out, hiding from the welfare people and all that stuff.
That's right.
He had no strong, positive male image.
So the daddy was on the run, has always been on the run.
And black women were forced to assume the role of man and woman. Mm-hmm. So in a way, when young black boys get in so much trouble, they're rebelling from the lack of a male figure within their home.
That's right. Because that was me. I can tell you about it now.
That's 90% of black kids today.
And I didn't understand it. I was angry and didn't understand it.
Because although the women in this country are great movers towards women's liberation and all that, and which no one in their right mind would not want that to happen. Mm-hmm. But it further shows a way of destruction to the black male.
Right.
And he rebels against it, and he strikes out against it, and he ends up in jail.
Right. That's right. He ends up in jail.
And that's why they're building more jails.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that the black boy is right, the black male, I should say, because sometimes it's hard to use that word boy, because some black white folks want to still call me a boy.
Right.
And I'm 60-some years old.
Right. And that's true. That's true. Even though